It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Today is August 26th, and I want to welcome you to episode 28 of Coffee and Cloud Native. It's getting really confusing. It's just like 26, 28, 20... So I'm really looking forward to like September 1st, where it'll be episode, I don't know, 33 or something like that, and then I'll be less confused. This is episode 28 of Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins. Every night, I and my army of bots scour the internet and look for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and every day you'll find me here to share it with you. This is a curated list of content. I go through about 200 submissions every night, and I select only a handful for the next day's show. And it's funny, like last night was one of the nights where I had 140 submissions to go through, and by the end of it all, I had like 4 things that I thought were worth talking about. So fortunately, I had some stuff left over from yesterday, and I also had a backlog. But today's just going to be a laid-back kind of show, and that'll allow me to spend more time on the part 2 of the tool of the day from yesterday, which is good. So I'm excited to be here to share these things with you. And let's go figure out who's in the chat. Dun, dun, dun. Where's Chrome? I hate that YouTube only works on Chrome. I don't use Chrome. I don't trust Chrome, mostly. I'm like, here's all my personal data. Just give it to Google. Good morning, Devin. Good morning, Ariel. And we have Peter, Chris, and Mose. Good morning, everybody. If any of you are watching and you are not in the chat, come join the chat. This is where the real stuff happens. Oh, audio is cutting in and out. That's interesting. Oh, no, dynamics is off. Okay, let me know if that continues. The streaming service that I use, one of their endpoints was actually down this morning. So I'm connected through a different one, but it's still optimized. My microphone's like right here. So yeah, so let me know. From where I'm sitting, it looks good. Anyway, let me know. I can make it louder. I can yell. Hey! I'll make it louder to start. Okay. All right, so Mo says looks good. Der Zufall. Good morning. All right, cool. All right, we'll just continue. Right, what was I doing? I was switching to the browser to start talking about stuff. Oh yeah, item number 1. Kubernetes 1.19 is out, sort of. It was actually supposed to come out yesterday, and I haven't refreshed this morning. This is what it looked like last night. And it's funny because like Canonical announced 1.19, and everything that everybody knew about was that it was going to drop on August 25th. Let's refresh and see what we get. Okay, well, 1.19 might be out. You can actually get it from Canonical if you're using microcates or something like that. I don't know why it's not on the releases page. I don't know why it's not in the news. I don't know, but it's coming. Maybe today. Who knows? There is a bunch of cool stuff coming in 1.19 or possibly already here, depending on where you're at and what you're doing. So let's just scroll through Canonical's page. And, bless their little hearts. Canonical's page was about, Canonical is awesome! Microcates is awesome! Get your Kubernetes from Canonical! Sysdig's page is like, hey, there's a bunch of really cool stuff coming in 1.19. Let's just talk about it. So I'm going to show their page, and I'm just going to laugh at Canonical. We've got some interesting things. The whole deprecated API thing was a problem when Ingresses transitioned, and basically stuff comes out in beta and people just use it in production, and once it's actually in production, there's less of an incentive to move it out of beta because that's a breaking change. So they've actually addressed that from a procedural standpoint. Is this big enough? You can make it bigger. Hey, there we go. They've addressed this from a procedural standpoint where they're going to require a transition from beta. They're going to warn when you're using the wrong API endpoint and some other stuff. And then things that go into beta, if they don't graduate, they're actually going to go back out of beta. So beta is not, it's a transition state, which is what it's really supposed to be. What else is coming that's cool? Kubernetes support window increased to 1 year. Okay. When you have a release schedule that's every 3 months, I don't know. I don't know that increasing the support window to 1 year is really all that useful. But for some, it's probably going to be nice. And those are really the biggest things that I saw that jumped out at me. Supporting CRI Containerd on Windows, that sounds cool. Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that's coming that may or may not. So let's just scroll through the rest of these. Customization with patches, structured logging. This is all alpha. Redesign event API. Oh, yay! Ingress graduates to V1. That's cool, since everybody's been using it for basically ever. All right, so this may or may not come out today. It is supposed to be coming out imminently. Get yourself some 1.19. Take it for a spin. Next up, we have Cert-manager Day. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I love Cert-manager. I love me some Cert-manager. Cert-manager, I think, is hands down the best way to get certificate management in a Kubernetes cluster, even if you're not using Let's Encrypt. Just being able to... Certificates are one of those things that you just shouldn't have to worry about. When I'm going through stuff, I periodically find things where they're like, this will monitor certificates in your Kubernetes cluster and tell you when they need to be updated. Well, that's not something that I should have to do. TLS, I mean, we're not talking about certificate rotation between the Kubernetes endpoints. We're talking about TLS certificates securing ingress type stuff or securing workloads in the cluster. I want everything wrapped in TLS. I don't want to have to worry about remembering to go in and renew those things or dealing with them when they're down. So Cert-manager just takes care of that. It'll get certs from whatever, and then it'll handle the renewal of them and applying them to things and doing all that wonderful stuff. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. I don't want to sneeze into the mic. They are finally going to get a 1.0 release. They've been working so hard and breaking all sorts of stuff throughout the course of that, as they've just been trying to get it right. So 1.0 is coming out, and they're having a 4-hour community day. It's not really a conference or anything like that, but they're having a community day, and I will be there because I love JetStack. I love Cert-manager. I'll keep saying that. Go register. Show your support. Cert-manager is a huge, huge part of what makes Kubernetes amazing. And what will they be talking about? They won't tell us. Full agenda and speakers coming soon. I was gonna talk on the page, so they're also super responsive. I grabbed one of the guys on the Kubernetes Slack and said, and then they fixed it. So you can go and register now. I'll have a link to this in the video description. And as long as we're talking about training, let's talk about Traefik. Traefik is a great load balancer. It makes a great ingress controller as well. It's hard for me to pick and choose. You know, I want... Actually, there's a story I'll tell you. There's a story that my mom tells about when I was a kid where I had a handful of French fries in this hand and a handful of French fries in this hand and a mouthful of French fries. And there were still French fries on the plate, and I was crying because I didn't have enough French fries. That's kind of the definition of my life. I love all of these cool things. I want to play with all of these cool things, but I have to pick something for production. So right now I'm not working with Traefik. I have worked with Traefik before. I talk to these guys at KubeCon all the time. Containers is wonderful. So Traefik, they are putting out a training course, and I think that this is important because I'm speeding up my thing. I think this is important because when they migrated from 1.x to 2.x, they introduced some features that dramatically changed the complexity. So if you were used to doing stuff with 1.x, that transition was pretty rough. And they've tried to make that better, but it's still pretty rough. And then you have situations where like K3S is still using 1.7 because it's lighter weight and requires less interaction. It behaves more just like a standard ingress controller. But the stuff that's available in Traefik version 2 is really good and leads you into using Mesh, which is their service mesh. And I would like to see more people feeling more comfortable and confident with the lexicon for their stuff and also how to use it. So when I saw that training is coming, I jumped all over that. It is early access training. It's being actually offered by 56k.cloud, but it's built in conjunction with Containous. And because it's early access, it's not complete, but that means that you can get it for the low, low price of just $25. And you'll get whatever they have, and as they come out with new modules and new stuff, then they'll, well, then you'll just get those for free. Check this out if you use Traefik, and let me know how it is. Control page down. How do I switch to the browser? Yay! And as long as we're talking about Traefik, do you know Saiyam? If you don't know Saiyam, you've been living under a rock. This guy is everywhere. I was talking to him yesterday, and I was like, how are you everywhere? Like, don't you have a job? He's an ambassador. He's at every single KubeCon event. He's at my events. He's at, like, basically everywhere I go that has anything to do with Kubernetes and Cloud Native, Saiyam is there. And he's a really nice guy. He's been putting together live streams and training videos about all sorts of stuff. And he has an upcoming live stream where he's going to do a deep dive into Traefik. The thumbnail rolls off the side of the screen there, but this is on the 5th of September, and it's at 8:30 p.m. I don't know what time zone that's in, but I will have a link to this in the video description as well. And just check him out, give him a thumbs up, look at the other stuff he's doing. He works really, really hard to educate and inform the entire community. Great guy. Do you know that Minio's paid tiers have a cap? Well, first of all, do you know what Minio is? Minio is... Today, apparently, is going to be hands down the best. Minio is hands down the best S3 compatible object store. It's simple, it's powerful, it's easy to use, it's open source, and in fact, if you go to give them money, if you wave money in their face, they're more likely to tell you, you know what, why don't you just use the open source version if the workloads, if the storage that you're using isn't mission critical, because, well, because we don't want to take your money if we don't have to. I respect that. There are a lot of companies who work on the opposite agenda. But then in this article that they released, what did it say, the 26th? All right, so this is like a little over a week old, but it's been in the backlog. They talk about their pricing plans, which I don't have up here, but it's interesting. Why don't I have those up there? All right, so if you get an enterprise subscription from Minio, there are two tiers that are paid tiers, and they charge you based on the amount of storage that you're using. Up to a limit. Beyond that limit, it's free. Which is, I mean, first of all, their pricing is already competitive. But the fact that, yeah, okay, so here, at 10 petabytes in the standard plan and 5 petabytes in the enterprise plan, they just stop looking at how much you're using. So when you're looking to pay for something that charges you based on the amount of storage in use, you are subconsciously incentivized to use less storage, because you're like, oh, should I really keep my backups for that long? Because I'm going to have to pay for it. And you shouldn't have to think like that. You shouldn't have to make those kinds of decisions. You shouldn't have to trade functionality and best practices for dollars when... I don't care who you are. Paying money for things matters. I discovered that a friend of mine just sold his apartment in Santiago at a $200,000 loss. I discovered this last night because another friend of mine bought it. Why? Like, there's got to be some reason for that. The guy who owned the apartment is not hurting for money, but there's no situation where you have so much money that wasting it doesn't cause some kind of pain. So seeing a company offer a pricing plan where they're like, yeah, we could charge you more money. In fact, we could charge you money at all, but we're not going to, because we want you to make the best decision that's right for you, is awesome. So whether you pay for Minio or not, if you have any choice in S3 object storage, you know, if you have a choice between running it on-prem with something like Minio, or choosing between Minio and like object store in Ceph or Rook or whatever, really, these guys are amazing. Check them out. I have videos on doing Rancher backups to Minio as well, so if you're looking to do any of that, well, you know, I have videos. A lot of my videos really need to be updated, so I'm aware of that, and now that I have the latest K3S video out there, I'll start trying to get some of these from early in the channel refreshed as well, like how to do rancher installations on K3s and stuff like that. Slurping the coffee. Michael says, but then you can only use S3. That's interesting. I'm assuming that you're responding to my statement of if you have a choice, between like Ceph or blah, 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 blah. Yes, but there are a lot of situations where so I've seen people actually choose Ceph for object storage. And that's a level of complexity that you just don't need in your life. Minio, you can run Minio on all sorts of things. I run Minio on a Synology NAS here in my house. Like Minio is it just needs some backing storage, and it just speaks the S3 protocol, and it does lifecycle. It's great. However, if you are in an environment where you need to consolidate your storage because you're doing multiple things, then sure, don't choose Minio just because it's Minio if the other thing that you're using also does S3 compatible storage, because then you're increasing your complexity by having two separate systems that you have to support. So make a wise decision, but I love them. They're in my list of hands down the awesome. Quick shout out to Gitlab, another company that I absolutely love for, I was going to say passing, but it's not like there's an exam for it, for becoming oh God, what's the acronym? A KCSP, a Kubernetes Certified Service Provider. GitLab does great things with Kubernetes, and this status from the CNCF is recognition that they have the skills and the engineering resources certified in-house to be able to advise you on Kubernetes decisions and work with you to make sure that the stuff that you implement that works with Kubernetes is good. I very much like everything about GitLab. They're also in my list of hands down the awesome. And do you work with GitLab? I think everybody who's worked with GitLab for any length of time has a GitLab story about this is something that they did that's really cool. So if you have one of those, post it in the chat or post it in the comments if you're watching the video later. Oh, how do I get to the top? There's how I get to the top. The helm-stable repo is deprecated. It's been deprecated for a while. And in fact, stable charts have recently been delisted, and the whole thing shuts down in November. So if you are using charts from the helm-stable repo, you need to fix that. Otherwise, your stuff is going to break. What most companies are doing is they're migrating their stuff to their own Helm repositories. So pretty soon you have to figure out, oh, I got to pull from here, and then I got to pull from there, and then I got to pull from there. That's more cognitive load for you. That's more work that you have to do. And there's a better way. We've talked about Chart Center from jFrog before. And jFrog wrote an article on how to migrate from helm-stable to Chart Center for the Nginx package. Chart. Coffee for Nginx. Nginx is the most common ingress controller out there, so this is the sort of thing that a lot of people are going to first try to move. And they show there's a minimal amount of downtime, obviously, because you are doing an upgrade and you are restarting stuff, and it may need to recreate the load balancer service because technically it's removing the old chart and replacing it with a new one. However, their article does a very good job of preparing you for that, demonstrating how to do an installation. This could also be bigger, can't it? Demonstrating how to do an installation in a dev state first before actually replacing your production Nginx ingress controller chart with the one from Chart Center. Now, why would you use Chart Center? Because jFrog recognizes that the more distributed all of these charts are across the landscape, the greater the opportunity for you to end up with a bad chart. Where you might end up thinking that you're pulling a chart from a reputable vendor, but it's actually some non-reputable individual who's got some stuff out there that's going to try and compromise your systems. Chart Center does, well, first of all the charts are immutable. Once they're up there, they don't get changed. You can version them, but then every single chart that gets loaded in there has a whole vulnerability scan done on all of its dependencies, and you can see this in the chart information itself. So you can know what you're installing, the risk for installing it, where it comes from, what dependencies it has, all for free. There was a reason that the helm-stable repo was in one place, and there's a reason that they decided not to do it. jFrog has decided to take that responsibility on and to do so in a way that protects the community. Hands down, the awesome. They do other cool stuff too, but Chart Center. Sasha, good morning, or good afternoon. Good day. I'll say good morning. It's pouring rain outside. It's been pouring rain for like 3 days. Have you ever, of course you have. If you've ever done anything in Kubernetes where you had to remove a namespace, you have no doubt encountered namespaces stuck in Terminating. They're usually stuck because there's a finalizer. The finalizers were put in there for a reason. The finalizer makes sure that all of the things that depend on the namespace have been removed before the namespace can be removed. So if that's stuck, there's some reason that it's stuck. But it's not really been easy to find what that reason is. So the recommendation generally is you edit the namespace, remove the finalizer, namespace gets removed, and then depending on what it was, you can go and fire the command off of the API and possibly deal with whatever was stuck. There are risks associated with doing so that I wasn't even aware of. Red Hat has written a blog that shows you, first of all, how to simulate this. So you can go and test this in your environment. And they talk about, the normal way that you would handle this. They talk about how now there's actually a status field that shows up in the namespace YAML, the namespace manifest, that will explain what it might be waiting on. So it's not just finalizer is stuck, good luck, have a nice day. You can actually go and see what it might be stuck on and go and address that. But they go on to show how if you just nuke the namespace by removing the finalizer and that thing, in this case it was a secret, remains, what are the consequences of that? And they show that somebody else could come along and try to create another namespace and then create another secret with a similar name, and they're not able to do so because the object already exists, right? And that's how namespaces work. But then they have access to that thing. So this could actually be a secret that somebody now can see who shouldn't be able to see it. And that's just one example of the kind of risk that's present from doing this. So they then go on to show a better way of determining the cause of why it's stuck, and how to search the API server, how to search etcd, how to find what's actually creating the problem, and remove that so that the finalizer can finish and your namespace can be deleted properly. Most everything in this article actually is for OpenShift, but pretty much all of it is actually just, you can do the same thing with kube control. For the things that can't, the one that I saw that I didn't even realize that the OC command could do that's actually pretty cool is they have an OC whoami-t that gets your token to use as a bearer token for communicating directly with the API. It's like, wow, that's really neat. Why is there not a kube control plugin that does that? And there's not. So any of you who are watching, if you feel like making a kube control plugin that does this right here, this is basically the same thing. This will reach out and get the secret for your RBAC authorization and then turn it into a token that you can then use for curl queries against the API. This is in the Kubernetes docs. Okay, we got to get to the tool of the day. So the handful of things that I had for the rest of today will actually get moved to tomorrow. And now let's talk about the tool of the day, part 2. Yesterday, I talked about Vertical Pod Autoscaler. Vertical Pod Autoscaler does adjustments of resources and limits on your workloads, and it actually observes and then it has multiple parts. It has a recommendation part, and it has an actual thing that does it part. And so it will make adjustments on the fly. But in doing so, it will restart your workloads, and you have to trust that it can actually make a good decision. And as you'll see in a moment, it may not be able to. Well, as I'll tell you in a moment, it may not be able to. Fairwinds, who we have had on the show for various reasons as their open source products come up to the surface, has a thing called Goldilocks. This will automatically install just the recommendation engine piece of the vertical pod autoscaler. All you need to have in your cluster is metric server, and then it will give you a very nice web interface dashboard thing to recommend the changes that you should make. I actually spent some time with this last night. It's not as perfect as I wanted it to be, but it's close, and there are open issues for fixing it. So let me first show it to you, and then we can... I don't have my Magalix stuff up. We had Magalix up last week, so this is kind of a... Magalix is a SaaS. Magalix will take information, it runs an agent on your system, it'll take that information, send it out to their SaaS service, and then make recommendations, and if you're paying for the service, it can actually apply those recommendations. There are situations where you can't send your data outside of your data center for compliance reasons or security or whatever. So I was looking for something that would allow you to do that inside of your data center. Let's quickly jump over to, I'm like squinting at my Stream Deck because I'm still trying to not wear my glasses. Hey, recognize this? So let's get the Goldilocks dashboard. Let's set up a port forward. That's good. Let's jump back to the browser and let's hit localhost 8080. All right, I have this running on just a couple of namespaces. Basically, you install this and then you label a namespace, and it within about 30 seconds, it picks it up and it starts pulling information from it. But be warned. First of all, here's the bug. Right now, there's a bug that shows that requests and limits are actually the same number. It's picking up the limit number. They know about this, and there's an issue, so this will get fixed. I set this to a lower number last night. The second part isn't actually a bug in Fairwinds or in Goldilocks. It's a demonstration of why vertical pod autoscaler shouldn't be given free reign of your cluster. And I can't show it to you because it goes away. But when these things start, so you have two options here. Guaranteed QoS, which is going to set the same number for request and limit. So it's going to reserve exactly what it will use. And then there's burstable QoS, which is more along the lines of what I do, where there's a minimum and then it can move within a range. With Magalix, or if you're using a monitoring component that has Prometheus and Grafana, like Rancher's monitoring, then you'll be able to see the graphs of the utilization over time, and that's helpful for you to make a decision. Goldilocks doesn't have that, but that's something that you can get from somewhere else. So there's no reason that they should also bake this into their product. They're just trying to give you a solution that is as light as possible, and you can get that from the other place. However, vertical pod autoscaler, when you first run this, the very first recommendation that it gave me, this is a WordPress site, and I know from looking at Magalix that this thing uses about like less than 50 megs of RAM as it's doing its stuff throughout the day. In fact, let me see if I can get the Magalix console up here. Vertical pod autoscaler's first recommendation was that I allocate that WordPress site 40 gigabytes of RAM, which is more than any of the nodes in my cluster have, and might also be more than the entire cluster has. So it default started out with, give it all the RAM. And had VPA actually been permitted to make that change, I don't know that it wouldn't have made that change to everything that I put it in for. Let's see, Kube Optimizer. Hang on, how do I get to this? Workloads. Dun, 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 dun. Whoops, That's not the one I wanted. There we go. All right, yeah, so here's the history of the actual CPU usage. It doesn't have, oh, this, I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm not looking at memory. Memory limit. Okay, so memory is a little higher than I described. I was thinking of the CPU one. So here you see that over the last 10 days, 8 days, you know, it maxed at like 250, and then it mostly hovers at around 150. So being able to look at this, I can make a good decision. I definitely don't need 40 gigabytes of RAM allocated to this particular system. The other thing about Goldilocks that I've only been running it since last night, so I'm hoping that this changes over time, but it appears that their minimums are 25 millicores and 250. I know that it's MB-bytes, but I just have a really hard time saying that. 50 megabytes of RAM, and it doesn't look like they'll recommend anything lower than that. So in the case of some of my sites that use very little RAM at all, I hope that there's a way that we can adjust that to get it to, or that it adjusts automatically to be more reflective of what the actual workload is using. Der Zufall says that it just had this issue last week. Good to know there's a solution. Unfortunately, I didn't see when you wrote that, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Hopefully it's in reference to this. So this is cool. When I decided to make it a tool of the day, I was doing that based off of what I saw that it could do. Having used it last night, I think that it's like 90% of the way there, and that they just need to make some minor changes to it, fix that one bug, possibly make some other things tunable. But they're a very responsive company. So if you want to take this for a spin, it's open source. So what does that mean? That means there's a GitHub repo. That means that you can fix it yourself and you can issue pull requests. It means that you can open issues. If you're going to open an issue, don't just bitch about the things that are broken or wrong. Offer a solution. Say, hey, this is what I found. This is the experience I had. You know, it would be helpful if it was like this, and start a discussion and have a conversation. And remember that everybody who's doing anything, in almost every single case, they're trying to do the best that they can. So don't walk in and hit them with a stick. It's easy to forget that. It's easy, especially when we're far away and we're all working from home, to remember that the people on the other end of the invisible phone line are also people. So that's Goldilocks, today's long and drawn out tool of the day, a good way to use vertical pod autoscaler recommendations, but still maintain control over implementation of the solution itself. And that is all for today. I will post all of the links in the video description and the Git repo as soon as the show ends. If you follow me on Twitter, I got to change that. I'll post them all within a half an hour or so. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a notification when that happens. If you have something you'd like me to consider for the show, hit me up and let me know. My contact details are in the video description, or you can tweet with the CNCN hashtag and I will pick it up. If any of the tools that I mentioned are tools that you use, let me know in the comments. You know, let the people whose tools you use know that you use them. That was a really complicated sentence. Anyway, let me know in the comments. I like to know that people tried out the things. I'd like to know your experience. I'd like to know if it's good, if it's bad. I had something on today that I actually needed I had something I was going to talk about that I wanted your help with, because it was one of those things where I was like, this seems like it might be really cool, but I don't really understand. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Anyway, yeah, so I'll be here every weekday as long as there's something to talk about. And since I can't seem to fit the show into 30 minutes, there's always, always, always going to be something to talk about. Have a great day, everyone. Keep learning. I will see you tomorrow in the next show. Goodbye.